This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy.
Yeah, it's cold. It's cold here too, but not that cold. It's like in the 60s, which is still too cold for me as well.
Yeah. Well, it's probably like that during the day here. But like I said, it got a little cooler last night. And then I woke up this morning and took a cold shower, and it was like Jesus, man.
Torture.
Well, I don't know. I like the cold therapy. Like I do the cold plunge and all that, but I couldn't do a plunge this morning, so I did a shower. And the shower, I think, is arguably worse because you're like in and out of the water. Like the cold plunge. I don't know if you've ever done one of those or not, but it's like it like completely submerges you like up to your shoulders or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like a shower. You're in and out of the water. So I don't know. I feel like it's a lot colder that way.
I've done ice baths when I was in high school. Like I did a lot of sports, so ice baths were pretty common. To me, cold is abuse. I cannot handle cold at all. So that was torture, but I always felt, but I do think that it helps your immune system when you do the cold stuff. Like it is really good for you health wise. I can't make myself do it. I can't.
Well, it depends on so the thing about ice baths is you can't really get deep enough into the water. You know what I mean? Like it's like, unless you have a really big bathtub, unless you have one of those like jacuzzi type bathtubs probably.
Yeah, I definitely didn't.
Yeah, and then you got to like put ice in the thing and all that. But I don't know, man, those cold showers, I think the cold showers are enough. If that's all you have, like you'll be cold, trust me.
I'll pass, so no thanks.
Well,
I know. And I will preach to people like the actual benefits, especially people who have like arthritis and things like that. Like it is really good for you. I'll preach it all day, but I'm like, listen to what I say, not what I do, because I can't convince myself.
Well, it has a lot of psychological benefits too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's like the adrenaline and the dopamine and all that. Well, adrenaline, I guess is not necessarily a good thing, but it's like it supposedly trains you how to operate when you have a lot of adrenaline in your system. Mm-hmm. It's good for stress. I find it is good for stress because it's like a training ground for how you're going to handle a stressful situation. Because it's pretty stressful being in cold water like that. Like you want to get out as soon as you're in.
Yeah. Your body.
And then it's overcoming the mental battle. Not really wanting to be there, but putting yourself in there, and all that good stuff. So, before we get too far into this, so how I normally start this out is ask you guys to introduce yourself. So if you want to, whatever you think is relevant, whatever you want to share, and then we can, go from there.
Awesome. Okay. Hi. Yeah, I'm Jacquelynn Wolfheart. I'm just an all around awesome person. No, just kidding. I'm an all right person. I am a psychologist. I am Dr. Wolfheart, but that makes me sound like I'm a medical professional, and I am not. So I just go by Wolfheart, Jacquelynn Wolfheart. I have my own practice at the moment. Not that I don't work with other practices as well. I also own a Wolf Media Festival, which is like films and authors and all sorts of things along those lines. And I'm a mom. I'm just kind of I'm a human living life.
First of all, a human living life. I like that. But you say doctor, you say like that. If you say doctor, it implies that you're a medical doctor, but I feel like a doctor of the mind is arguably the most important doctor there is. I don't know though. I just feel like, no, you're casually throwing around the term doctor, but I don't know, man. I personally feel like the mind is like the most important because
it is so powerful. I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to, think I don't have cancer and it'll cure your cancer, but it is along those lines of sometimes just thinking positive can cure a lot of your physical ailments. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like usually as soon as somebody says doctor, then it really does imply medical terminology, which, I know, but I can't perform medical stuff for you. I can't prescribe you a antibiotic for your ear infection or whatever. That's not me. And I also feel like I tend to work with children mostly, and it makes me seem a little snooty if I'm like, no, Dr. Wolfheart, I'm like, just whatever you want to call me, like call me that if it makes you feel like we're more connected, like do that. It's better for both of us.
Yeah. I think, so it's weird, man, because I feel like the brain is part of the body. You know what I mean? Like you have a physical brain, like you can do things to the brain, whether that's chemically or whatever, to enhance it or help it out or whatever. But I feel like the mind is like a different thing. Like you can't perform surgery on somebody and see their mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can see their brain, but you can't see like their mind. Like, am I making sense?
You can't really see their thoughts and their thought process.
Right.
But some actual cool things that you can see more along the lines are people with severe depression. You can see that on an MRI. You can see if you eat sugar and cocaine, you can see the same parts of your brain light up. Not that you eat cocaine, but you know what I mean? Like
Right.
there's like certain things that you might ingest that affect you physically. You can actually see them on an MRI, how they affect you mentally as well, which I think is pretty cool. And a lot of people don't realize that you can physically see depression, but we can't see your thoughts necessarily on what your process of that depression is. Unfortunately, I hope we get there someday, because I want to see people's dreams. I want to see what you're dreaming about.
Dreams. I was talking to somebody about dreams yesterday. Like, I think one thing that I really am grateful for about myself, about my own mentality, because I don't think a lot of people experience this, but obviously some people don't experience dreams, is what I hear. Like some people, if they do, they're not really vivid or they don't really remember them. But like
Right.
my dreams, man, I have some intense dreams. And I know it kind of freaks people out sometimes. Like they'll see I was talking about this just yesterday. They'll see something that's like random in their dream or whatever, or it seems random or it doesn't make sense or whatever. I'm like, dude, you got to explore that. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like there's apps and websites, and you can ask like AI, Chat GPT, or whatever. You can say like, what does it mean if I see this in my dream? And it'll tell you, and you can make a connection to like, what's going on in your waking life. Like, should you take this job? Should you, maybe break up with this person if you see something in your dream? Like, I don't know, but it's like the dreams, man. I think people just like think they just live out a movie or whatever, but it's like not like that at all, man. It's like,
yeah, they really
it's
are.
almost like, it's like I was saying yesterday, it's almost like dreams are like a spiritual thing more than a mental thing. It seems like.
Yeah, they actually can help a lot analyze your life, because basically what is happening when you're dreaming is your brain is trying to process something, but it's also trying to relax and take a break. So it's using imagery from other areas of your life to kind of process this more maybe stressful thing, more funny thing. It doesn't always have to be bad. It could be you're reliving that roller coaster fun time that you had yesterday or whatever, and your brain's like, let's do that again.
Yeah.
So it's not always bad. It could be positive things. But yeah, it's just like, it just is so crazy how your brain is like, well, let's do a lion washing the dishes. And you're like, what does that mean? Like what could that possibly mean in my life? But then you have to think about like, what does a lion typically represent in our own mentality, and what do dishes represent in our own mentality, and what can all those things, and then you start piecing together like that, how this lions are usually looked as like, the symbol of strength and pride and, like leadership and all that. And then you think of like dishes as like domesticated, hardworking, like never ending chore. Like, and you're like, how are those combined? And you're like, oh man, I'm, whatever. I really am the leader of my household, or whatever you conclusion you come to. And your brain's like, why are you talking about being the leader of your household? And then you kind of process through all that. So
I'm curious, man, just like for an off the record analysis of this, what would you, if somebody told you they had a dream like that, what would be your first thought? Like, just not know anything about the person.
Not knowing anything about the person, I think
if a lion was washing the dishes.
Yeah. Especially the washing the dishes part. First of all, I'd be like, I would say like, oh man, I could relate, but I actually don't wash the dishes in my house because that's my number one least favorite chore. So it's like everybody in the house except mom has a dish night. I make the dinner, you do the dishes. But in my head, I feel like, okay, washing the dishes, I could relate as a stressful situation, but to somebody else that might be a relaxing. Like, it's my only time of day where I have peace and quiet is when I'm doing that, so I think I would really start with like analyzing what does doing the dishes mean for you, and and move on from there. And it could mean, like I just said, it could mean something very different for somebody else. Like my teenagers who do the dishes, one of them does them so quickly but so well, like
Right.
professional level. The other one, it takes him 2 hours, and he does a good job, but it's like 2 hours for 5 plates and a pan.
Yeah.
What are you doing in there? So, like both of those two have probably a very different perception of what doing the dishes is. And so you'd have to kind of start really, really have to kind of micro break it down, the highlights of your dream. Because, there's all these other crazy pieces in your dream that are just fillers.
Right.
And then you have to try to determine, was there significant importance to that filler, or is it actually just a placeholder for nothing to connect dots or whatever? And yeah, so you kind of break it down like that. I think typically when people come telling you their dreams, it is because it was a stressful moment, and they typically do have stress in their life. It doesn't always have to be that. I mean, and stress doesn't always have to be bad. Stress can be good as well. Yeah, so you just have to like really break it down. And I'm glad that Google has, Google, what does this mean? Gives you 10 options. I haven't used AI for it, but that's awesome that somebody can just be like, what do you think this means? And AI is like, here's what I found for you, and go from there. Sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, you might find something on Google or AI, which is just AI would just be essentially whatever's on the internet anyways, just condensed. But it's like, I think it matters more of like what it means to you. Like, are you afraid of a lion, or do you see a lion as something that's like respectable and like courageous? So yeah, I think it's like to the like individual, to the specific person. Yeah, it's crazy, man. Dreams are a whole different. That's a whole. Is there like a profession that works specifically with dreams? I mean, I can't like. Is there like a dream analyst or something?
There's like professionally, there are types of psychologists who went a route of studying dreams and things along those lines. I have only done minimal that. Like, I don't have a specialty degree, but I've studied some of it because it fascinates me, not because I thought I can help anybody with it, But there are like actual routes in psychology you can take to get specialized in dream analysis. And there's a lot of like mystical professions that do it as well. And even though people might look at them as kind of like kooky or off the wall, they kind of go that same route as a degreed professional. Like, they're getting their information from a lot of the same places. It's just more like where their heart is leading them versus where their brain took them, kind of thing. So I wouldn't dismiss somebody who says they're a professional but they're a mystic or whatever. I wouldn't dismiss them. They probably have a lot of good information, and it's coming from the same place as degreed professionals. So there are a lot of professions that do it. I wish it was more mainstream because it's fascinating.
Well, and yeah, because that's why I was asking. I didn't know if like where they drew the line, like professionally, like if I mean, I think analyzing dreams is obviously there's a lot to that. There's a science to that, but I just didn't know where they drew the line as far as clinically. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. There's definitely specific criteria you can get to get certifications in those areas. I don't know medically, but psychologically there is a route you can take, which is so cool. I feel like when we really get to, like, if we would put more effort into that, we really could be watching people's dreams just dead on pretty soon. Like, I don't feel like that's too unrealistic to think about for the future. And some of these like mystic providers, I also feel like it's so funny to me because I don't not believe in anything. I kind of believe in a little bit of everything. So, but with these ones, I think like, what if we just don't have the science yet to prove what they're telling us? Like, when people are like, oh, this ghost is talking to me, like, yeah, are you crazy? Or do we just not have the capable science yet to prove that you're not lying to it, So I try not to dismiss anything and see what can I actually pull from it and use in reality. Does it make sense? Is it, kind of putting a scientific approach to somebody's cuckoo moment or whatever,
Yeah.
they're out of
Well,
this world moment.
it's like, man, one thing that really fascinates me about psychology is like everybody's experience is like subjective to them.
Right.
So it's like, how do you have a conversation with a person about their own psychology when that thing is literally unique to them? Like, how can you compare that to another person and say like, oh, well, these two people are completely different? But then it's like, because okay, for example, it's like if you go to a doctor about your arm or something, your elbow, like, okay, well, the arm is supposed to do this. This is how it works. It's supposed to be this way. Like everybody, most people have it, like this is something to compare to with most people. But then it's like your mind, like a person's mind, man, it's so specific, and like how they see the world is so subjective to them. And it's like, it's almost like, just from the outside looking in, I don't know professionally, but it's almost like each person is their own, it's like its own science in itself, like to how they see things. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just speculating here.
Yeah, well, I mean, how you were raised and brought up and all your life experiences are also going to frame one, how your brain interprets things and how to move forward that way, but it's also going to like determine how you see and handle other things as well. I use this example recently because I work a lot with sex trafficked children and sex abuse children who've been sexually abused. And to one kid who might come into me, they've been, since they were 4 years old, they've been raped every day. Now they're 11, and it's been like ongoing. Uncles, stepdad's friends, all these men abusing, right? And I'm coming in, and I got to work with this kid. Now I have this other kid who came in, and their uncle accidentally walked in on them in the bathroom while they were getting ready to shower. And for them, that is just as traumatic as what
Right.
this 11-year-old has gone through. And for me, I mean, like on the outside, when you see those two things, you want to be like, get over it. Like your uncle was accidentally, he apologized, you kind of just want to passively dismiss it. But that doesn't mean that person's brain isn't fearful that, it's going to happen again. Could it have led somewhere further? So you have to kind of like dismiss and never think about other people's, what they're going through in my profession. I mean, in my daily life, of course, I compare my kids to each other. Well, your brother can do it in 10 minutes. Why can't you? But as in general, you really have to think about like, not what is somebody else going through or how else are they handling it, but maybe think about like, well, this person who went through a thing tried this. Do you think that could help you too? Instead of like comparing all the time. And I really wish medical doctors would also do that because, I might have torn a ligament in my knee and I went back out the next day and started whatever sport again, while somebody else is like, I'm laid up for 6 months, but they're going to be like comparing, like it's the same situation. And I think that's unfair too, because maybe I have stronger muscles or this around that one broken ligament. And that's why I can get up and go do things again, while somebody else might not have had that, or maybe the way their nerve endings around that torn ligament got severed, it is more painful or whatever. So I wish doctors would also not compare. Like you have a general guideline, but let's look at you as the individual. I think we would get a lot further in medicine. Also, we would hear a lot less horror stories.
Well, and I think that I mean that is empathy. Like that's what empathy is, I feel like. And I like, so for me, man, one of the hardest things I had a problem with was like in entrepreneurship and being a leader, I try to be a very disciplined, motivated person. And like if somebody, if I was doing a job with somebody, if I had somebody working with me or whatever, and they didn't come to work for a specific reason that I felt like was a very, like not really a reason to not miss, to miss work.
Right.
It was like, I had to really understand that, like, and that's the missing work thing. That's a very simple example, but like just other things I had to understand it. Like, okay, that to this person, this means something that if X thing were to happen to me, it would mean the same thing. So if I go out and break my leg, to use your example, and can't move around, to me that might be equivalent in my mind of something that happened to me to somebody else. Can't come into work for something that I feel like is a lot more less severe, excuse, so to speak. And that was a really transformative lesson for me, because I was like, okay, well, this person is like, we all just experience life based on our own level of understanding. You know, if I'm talking to somebody and they have a completely different experience, which we all do, like you said, the way they see the world is going to be filtered. Yeah, I think filtered is the right way, through that lens of their experience. You know what I mean? And so, and with me and with you and everybody else. And so I guess the bottom line here is I think it's really important to understand that people are operating from their level of awareness.
Right.
Now, that's not an excuse, you know, for bad behavior or anything. I'm not saying excuse it. I'm saying if we understand like where a person's coming from and how, you know, in their mind was like, because I think a lot of times I think everybody's guilty of this. We kind of operate from inside our own minds, and we think that just because we think a thing, or we, you know, we have an opinion about something, is like what it should be. But I don't know, man. I think it all boils down to empathy. I think that's what we're talking about here. But the balance is not excusing the assholes in the world. You know what I mean? Like, not excusing the bad people, because there's a difference between having your subjective experience and a person just like absolutely having zero awareness and consciousness of anybody else's thoughts and feelings. You know what I mean? That's the different thing. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the world, well, like statistically, we already know that there's a lot more people who are naturally empathetic than people who are assholes.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot less empathetic people. There is.
Oh.
Yeah. So we'd like it to go the other way, but empathy is kind of like something that's helping us evolve as humans. It is the thing that at the end of the day moves us forward, instead of, I mean, if everybody was just assholes, we'd be dying all the time. We'd be killing each other. We wouldn't care that this is how it is. But when we have these empathetic people coming in, and especially when they can show somebody else, find that way to relate and compare, like, okay, you don't care that I'm barfing right now because you can work while you're barfing. But, you know, for me, barfing while I'm working is equivalent to you losing your arm. So if I can like get you to understand that, then maybe you'll be like, okay, cool, I'll quit, you know, come back when you're not barfing anymore.
Yeah.
But there are still some people who will never see that. It doesn't affect me, therefore then it can't affect you. There's always going to be that guy, you know, that person like that. I have a oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead. I don't want to throw you off.
Yeah, I have a friend who's like the most positive, upbeat person, always on the go, and she absolutely cannot see that somebody else might be having a bad day. So it's like an interesting version of an asshole, because she is so upbeat and positive, and like if somebody is like, I can't do it because I'm just really feeling like physically ill because of the stress or whatever, she's like, that's not a thing. Like, get over whatever you're thinking. I'm like, wow, like how can you be the most amazing human and the biggest asshole at the same time? It's a very unique asshole.
Well, but I feel like, so we were talking about connection, like connecting people, you know, so everybody could get in a single file line and hold hands, and that's like a physical connection. Or we could like several people could pick up this table at one time. Like that's like a connection physically with other people. And I guess, I don't know if maybe some point in the future we get to the point where we can communicate telepathically, you know, with our brains or whatever. Maybe that's like a mental, like a communication with our brain, which I think body language and stuff is a communication with your brain anyways.
Yeah.
But it's like with the mind, I feel like empathy is the only way for me to experience another person's mental state. You know what I mean? Like there's like, I mean, it's like, I feel like that's the best way, like for me to try to put myself in your shoes and say, okay, well, how do you see this situation? And now I have at least an idea of what your experience might be, even though it's a very low resolution one, you know. But I don't know. I feel like empathy is the way to connect your mind to other people, you know?
Yeah. And for some people, if it's kind of the extremes too, the people who are going to be the ones that can't connect. They're either people who've always only had good in their life, or people who've always only had bad in their life. Those are going to be the ones who can't see that somebody else is, because either they're going to have the mentality of get over it, or they're going to have the mentality of like, that's not real. And so those are the ones that are a little bit harder to like break through to get that, you'll find that a lot in like marriages, that, like it's the husband who can't see that this is a thing that's going on. And those are the ones that are harder, especially if the man, in my work that I've seen, and my clients that I've worked with, personal experience here, it's if the man has had a really rough childhood, those are the ones that are even worse. Like, how is he? I'm providing for her. I'm giving her everything she wants. She doesn't have to work anymore because she gets to be a stay home, and they like can't see how that might be stressful, or how, and they're semi right. Like, it does suck that you have to work all day, but it also sucks that this thing is going on in the other person's life. And so trying to find that way to get them to see each other, it can be super difficult. Sometimes I wish you can just be like, pop, and then boom, it's fixed, like that's all it takes. But in those cases too, it is like talking about, well, when you were going through that hard thing as a kid, did you like it? Was it something you wanted? And they oftentimes could admit like, no, it sucked, but they will usually come back with like, but it built me into who I am today, So it's like, yeah, it's kind of a really tough cycle. And I think exposure to stuff is like the best way to see that other people are living stuff that your brain can't process, and that's kind of what's going on in this, this other person who's important to you, your wife or whoever it may be. That's what's going on in their brain, is all this struggle. How can we help them get over the struggle? How can we help you not struggle by helping them not struggle? That's another one, is, am I going to get drawn into your negativity, or, viewed as negativity because you're struggling? Is it going to have a negative impact on me? It might. So how do we address that? But yeah, I think you're right with the, like, finding a connection it's how we save the world. It's literally how we save the world.
Yeah, because that's like, I feel like that's the collective mind. We hear a lot about the individual and collective. Like, I don't know how much you get into spirituality or anything, but it's like there's a collective mind of the human, I guess, race. You know what I mean? It's like, even as a society, even all society is the collective acting in a certain way. If you're afraid to go out, and walk down the street in the middle of the day, I feel like that's a byproduct of a society that's acting in a way collectively that's not good. You know what I mean? But it's like, and then it goes down to like, well, if each person did their own thing, and then you have the assholes, on the extreme part of the spectrum, you know what I mean, that like give a bad name for everybody. But I don't know, man, to go back to what we were talking about, you were talking about, the relationships and the husband and the wife and that kind of thing. I feel like, and I don't know if this is a psychological, phrase or phenomenon or whatever, but it's like, I feel like a big responsibility that we have is to balance ourselves. And what I mean by that is, so if you have a person, and this happens a lot with men, if they feel like they are a successful high achiever male, what they're going to try to do, I feel like, is provide for their family. I feel that's one of the things they feel like they need to do. But if you go too far with that, so like, it's like the same thing that makes you quote unquote successful, the hard work, the determination, the assertiveness, whatever it is. I mean, you obviously can't tip the scale too far in the other direction and just be assertive at every single moment of your life, right? Because then you're I don't want to use this word, then you're a narcissist. You know what I mean? Like, then you're bad. So it's like, it's finding a balance. It's like, whatever the qualities that you feel like you have about yourself, whether that's being assertive or intelligent or, empathetic, because even empathy on too far of the scale means you could be taken advantage of. You know what I mean? So there's like a balance. Right. So it's like, okay, so what, and this is what and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, being a psychologist. This is what I try to explain to people. It's like, okay, what qualities about yourself do you feel like you're most proud of, that are the most productive in your life? Okay. Let's just, since we're using this example, let's just say if it's disciplined, motivated, and assertive. Okay. Well, obviously that's probably doing you well in your career or whatever, but you can't take the extreme to that and I'm speaking from a male to their wife right here. You can't take the extreme of that. And if there's a problem in your marriage, take that same assertiveness and motivation and discipline to do it right then and there, because that might not be the time, Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, kind of that balance of whatever your positive traits are. Because if you have a positive trait, I feel like the same thing that you have, like your negative traits are like the inverse of your positive traits. And I know that sounds obvious, but it's like, I don't know another example to use other than the empathy, the being assertive. There's obviously a balance is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So first of all, a lot of times, like what's coming to mind right now, I'm just thinking that a lot of times something that you might think is your positive trait really might be your downfall. So you're taking this guy or this person, we'll say it could be either, doesn't need to be man or woman, but this person who's really killing it at work. They're the boss. Everybody goes to them for, what do I need to do next? Like they're looking for that. But really, so you're thinking like, I'm a great leader. I've got these assertive skills, whatever. You're thinking that, but really, are they coming to you because they're afraid of repercussions of not coming to you? Are they just following your every lead because they don't want to lose their job? Is your turnover rate high? And a lot of people, especially, you're going to see this more in like, I don't want to like insult anything, like not that it's not an important job, but maybe like a fast food manager kind of this.
Right.
The turnover rates are going to be high there. And chances are you're not a very good person. You're kind of an a-hole. You're, very bossy. And then you're thinking it's them. They don't know how to do their job. They don't, if they can't do that, then they're not good enough to work here. And like your job isn't to pick who's good enough to work here. It's your job to make them capable of working there. This is a low level job to train our whole society to eventually be more, And so you have that. So you might be thinking like, I'm a really great leader because the people I haven't fired yet do whatever I tell them to, So is that really your best attribute?
Right.
It might, the thing that you think is good might not actually be the thing that's good. So are you willing to hear that? That's the thing. Like, are you willing to go and like get opinions from people and ask them what you could work on? I know there's moments I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear anybody tell me I'm not the best mom. Like, please don't ever tell me that I'm not ready yet. But if you want to slowly say, if you, instead of being like, you really suck at making a chore list, I'm going to be like, I make the best chore list. But like, if you come to me in a different way and you say something like, hey, next time you make the chore list, can you section it off by days instead of by chore or whatever? I might be more receptive. But so are you receptive to hearing that your best quality is actually not your best quality? That's an important one. Then the second one is that each of our good qualities doesn't fit every situation.
Right.
If I'm the best boss ever, and maybe I really am, I'm a super great boss. My employees actually do love me, but now I'm going into surgery and they're like, we got to remove your appendix. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what you got to do. Like, if you guys just stay over here and do that, I'm going to be knocked out the whole time. So why do I care?
Yep.
Like, I shouldn't be bossing them around, but there are people who feel like they have to, kind of manage all of this. Like, actually, I think it's better if we have 3 nurses in here and they're like, yeah, well, that's not a thing that's going to happen. So like, it doesn't necessarily fit everything. Me being a good boss to my employees doesn't mean I'm a good parent to my children. Doesn't mean I'm a good spouse to my partner, So those, I have to figure out, just because I'm a good leader over here, how can I become a good leader in these other areas? They're not going to always cross. And maybe something that is my weakness at work might actually be my strength here, at home. Maybe at work I take extra time, or I kind of take extra time and listen to everybody, and that's throwing everybody's schedule off because I just spent an hour and a half working with this individual person trying to build them up instead of focusing on my whole team. And that's a weakness. Everybody's like, she's so great, man, she takes up a lot of time, right? At home, that's my work weakness. At home, getting individual time with my spouse is going to be so, beneficial. Getting individual time with my children is going to be so beneficial. But that's not necessarily going to work the same as a workplace. So you got to find that, your weakness and your strengths have to be different in every aspect of your life. How can you build? Which ones can you use to build the other ones? Which ones can you like forfeit altogether? It's not an easy process, especially like I was saying, like if you're not open to it, it's not going to be an easy process at all. But that's how you find the balance. That is how you find your balance, is finding which weaknesses you can work with and which, strengths you can move around a bit. That is how you find your balance.
Yeah. That was very well said. Basically what I did was I took a crayon box and just dumped it out, and you just like, you made a masterpiece out of it. So I appreciate that. Because that was what I was trying to say, but just in a much better way. Yeah, man. So I'm going to talk to some people on the podcast about leadership, leadership coaches and that kind of thing. But one thing that I'm finding out that I'm hearing from people is like one of the best qualities of leadership is authenticity, like self-authenticity, and being able to take that, because like taking criticism, it's not really criticism if it's constructive, if it's in a way that's going to benefit the organization or whatever.
Right.
You hear a lot of people like Tony Robbins, who talks about the success of a organization is directly related to the psychology of the leader. Like what is the leadership people? What's the psychology of those people? Because I think you're right. I think if people are in a place where they're too afraid, which is a really heavy way to say it when you think of a workplace, but that is a lot of people's reality at their workplace. If they're too afraid to make suggestions or come up to them with problems, like that's not how that's supposed to be, I feel like. Because I feel like as a leader, like most leaders that I know, most people who are in this space, a lot of what they do is like solving problems, is like problem solving for their organization, but it's also like being the authentic. It's almost like an exemplar of what you want the person in your organization to be, and you can't do that if you're not authentic. Like I feel like people see right through that, but it's going back to the fear thing. Like you can't just have everybody that's at your place be so fearful of you that they don't come to you with problems, because first of all, they're not going to come to you with problems if that's the case, and secondly, if there is an issue, it's going to be like, you're never going to know what happened. You're never going to get to the bottom of it, which means you can't prevent it in the future. You don't, and if you work directly with customers or clients, like it's going to seem like it's an integrity issue because the customer or client is going to see one thing. What actually happened was something else, and you don't even know what was that happened. So you can't explain it to the customer or client. It's just like it's a snowball effect, man.
Right.
But I think that comes down to like, I think it would be humility. Like how, like maybe our pride gets in the way.
Yeah, pride's dangerous. Pride can be so dangerous. Like you don't want to be like weak and unprideful at all, but you gotta know your limit. You gotta set your limit on that pride and just say, you know what, like right now is not my moment. Or, like if you want to actually use your pride, listen to what people are telling you or take advice from other people. Like that is something to be proud of. That is like really like being able to say like, oh yeah, I actually got this feedback and I put it to good use. Like people are going to congratulate you for that. But if you say like, yeah, this dumb bitch over here, sorry, this dummy over here, she's telling me this, that, or another, like what a cunt. She's so stupid or whatever. Like people aren't going to be like, you are so brave. You are just so brave for cursing off a small child or what, whatever it is. Like nobody's going to really, but they're going to be like, wow, you listened to what that your teenage employee just said to you and you made changes for the better. Like that's pretty impressive on both parts, so yeah, that's like if you really can't get rid of your pride, reframe your pride. Like,
but I think people respect that though, because they know it takes a lot to be in front of people that you lead and accept responsibility or faults or whatever, and say hey, I did this wrong, or I need to improve this. I mean, that takes a lot. That takes a lot. But it's also it just is part of being a leader. So there's like, if you want to be a leader, it's part of being a leader. I think being a boss is a whole different thing, and I think there's way too many of those in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's not enough leaders, man. There's way too many bosses. Okay, so I want to go back for a minute to talk about you. You said that you work mostly with children.
Right.
What's that like, man? Because I feel like that's like a whole different, that's a whole different person from out here in the adult world.
It really is, and like I kind of have, most of my cases are the worst of the worst of the worst of what humanity can do to each other. That's like what I'm seeing on a daily basis, and it could affect me myself, and I have to put myself in check often or take breaks a lot because it's hard to see what some of these kids are going through. But at the same time, they tend to be the easier ones to work with. They are the ones that you can literally watch grow every week and see the changes. And it's sometimes I hate it so much because they just went through. Like I had a 3 and 5-year-old a couple years ago who were set on fire by people who were like literally physically set on fire and then hung out a window after they had been raped by family members. And I'm supposed to teach those kids that the world is a beautiful place. Like I hate that. I hate that that is my job. Like clearly the world is not a beautiful place, especially for somebody who's had to live through that. So, but at the same time, I get to go see those kids, and they're not my clients at the moment. That was a few years ago, but I get to see those kids, and every week I actually get to see them seeing that the world can be beautiful again, and watching their behaviors change based on the fact that they can figure out how to feel safe, figure out how to love, figure out how to be loved. When you come to adults, that's the hard ones. Those are the ones that I sometimes I just wish I was allowed to shake them. Like, just stop doing the thing already. Like, you're a grown up, you should know to stop. But it doesn't, our brains weren't wired that way. Our brains weren't necessarily wired to just not do the thing that we're doing anymore. And some of it could be so easy, like when you get a domestic abuse situation. It seems so, everybody sees it and you're like, why didn't they just leave? Why didn't, like, because it's not easy. That's why. And I want you to think, or not, maybe not you, but think right now, could you just pack up and leave right now? Could you do that if you had to? It's not easy for anybody, even if you had all the money, financial support you needed. It's not easy to still just be like, oh, peace out my house, or peace out my job, or whatever you might be giving up in the process of getting the, bolting out of there. But there is that part of you that just wants to be like, why can't you see that it's easy to leave? Because it's not easy to leave. And same with like working with some narcissists. Oh, those are ones that I'm just like, oh, can I just rip my hair out? Some of them actually want to get help. And the thing with the narcissist is that their brain is never not going to be a narcissist. It's not something you get over, but it's like learning to mimic new patterns. But some of them don't want to mimic a new pattern because the bad pattern they're in has been so beneficial to them. So why would they start giving a crap about somebody else when this whole life, my whole life, I've just gotten what I want by being an a-hole? Or they're not always necessarily a-holes. They could be very manipulative in, love bombing and those kind of things. Just, waiting for that. That's more like a sociopath than a narcissist. But the narcissists are, make you want to pull your hair out sometimes. And they are ones you just wish you could shake and be like, quit. Like, why can't you just stop being an a-hole? Just for 5 minutes, stop it. Just 5 minutes, that's all I ask. But it is a whole new pattern building and working with them. And adults are so much harder, I think, than they are different than kids, but kids are better. Kids are so much better.
So the narcissist for a minute, talking about the narcissist, which they love talking about themselves. That was a joke, bad joke, very bad joke. But anyways, talking about the narcissist for a minute. So it comes from a place of fear. Is that right? It's motivated by fear. Like it's like from an insecurity.
I would say, I don't know. Yeah, I would use insecurity more than I would say fear.
Okay.
Those can align a lot, but not necessarily fear. Fear, you tend to be more weak, and a narcissist is more like somebody seeking moments to take an advantage, and that is from like inferiority feelings and things like that. So.
Yeah, they do that to compensate the insecurity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, if they can somehow learn to be a secure person or confident or whatever, would that not alleviate a lot of the behaviors?
Yeah, so it's all the way your brain is wired, and there's just some things you can't unwire or rewire. And especially switching back over to what we call sociopaths, it's actually called antisocial personality disorder. Those ones, there is absolutely no rewiring that. It's just building new patterns. Same with a narcissist. You're not going to undo what their brain has done, or how their brain was formed and developed, but you can build new paths. So, but the moment they slip off that path, it's going to be right back to those old patterns, those old, the negative, what their brain is wired to do.
Mhm.
But also the same thing, like a narcissist or even a sociopath, they can be really great people. They can do really awesome things. They're just frustrating. They can just also be frustrating. Like imagine somebody with antisocial personality disorder who like their whole life has been geared up on like, how can I please other people? Like you want to be pleased, right? I want somebody to come in my life and just want to please me all the time, but there's
Mhm.
no emotion for them behind it except like I've been trained to please this person or please
Mhm.
people. So we don't think of them as a sociopath because like, oh, they're so nice, but they're not nice based on emotion. They're nice based on what they've been trained to do. Because we tend to think of antisocial only when it comes to like Dahmers and,
Yeah.
like these murders and stuff, which, that's a whole nother thing where their pattern has been do this thing that feels good to me. Doesn't matter the consequences. I'm going to keep going. And, that's how it works for me. And, but that can work on the other spectrum as well of like, do this thing that people like because I get recognition for it. I get, everybody's awarding me. And so same with a narcissist. They can be really great people. Just at the center of it, it's all for them. It's all for the sake of themselves and not the sake of everybody around them. It just happened to also benefit everybody around them or happen to also screw everybody around them over kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So,
those are really fascinating ones to work with because they, like I said, they can be good. They could be great people, and
well, they're
so that makes it
probably
hard.
just by the nature of the, I don't know if it's called a disorder or whatever, but just by the nature of the disorder, they're probably intelligent people. Or at least some of them are, I would imagine,
Yeah,
because I would imagine you have to be intelligent to manipulate people or whatever. Or maybe it's just by what would it be? Power, force, not force. Like
rarely
what is?
force. Yeah, but I like to call it crackhead mentality. If you've ever been around, especially people who are addicted to crack, but a lot of people who have hard drug addictions, they are the MacGyvers of life. They can
Hmm.
have no money, been living on the streets, and
Yep.
somehow raise $1,000 today to buy, whatever. And you're like, and that's because they're like hyper perceptive of every
Right.
single thing going around, and they know all the, ins and outs, and like bless the crackheads for showing me that it's possible to do a lot of things. And but I think that's the same kind of thing with um sort of these darker minded people whose brain is sort of darker minded, that they are hyper perceptive, maybe not necessarily intelligent, but they can definitely fit pieces together a lot
Hmm.
easier than we're looking at each other and I'm like, oh, you're in a black room and you're wearing a shirt and you're like, oh, she's got this thing in the background. But another person might be like, whoa, she's got 43 gray hairs. That's like they're hyper picking up on
Wow.
those things. And like, how can I use that against her? Kind of thing. Like in particular, I like my gray hairs, so it's not going to work. But that might be something to somebody that they can use against me or something.
Yeah.
Or same for you. Like, I know you're not really in a black, you're not secluded in this tiny room, but somebody else might only think like, oh, cool, he's got this little tiny studio, or somebody else is using like, how can I use your studio against you, and they're
Hmm.
picking all these pieces apart, like what's on the other side of this camera, what's out of frame, and they're thinking about all that. While most people are just looking like, oh, look at this young man, like, so yeah, hyper perceptive is like, I think the best way to, and you don't want to
Well, that.
build their ego by calling them intelligent also.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, because I feel like it would take a lot of energy to notice like a lot of those things. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, how would you even? There's no way I could talk to you and have an authentic conversation with you and just think about all those things you just said. Like, I
right.
mean, there's no way. Like, I don't know. But so okay, so let me ask you this because, especially in the dating sphere or whatever, I would say like 50% of people's ex is a narcissist. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like my ex is a narcissist, whatever. And I just like, I don't know the statistics of how many people are actually narcissists, but I feel like it's not 50%.
It's not. Yeah, it's not.
But it's like, okay, so we have this, I'm going to call it a disorder. I don't know if it's called a disorder or not. A disorder of narcissism. That's a real thing that people really, I'm going to say, struggle with, because even though other people struggle because of that, like they're the catalyst for all these problems that other people experience. So, okay, so these people struggle with this, but then you have like relationships, and I've seen it mostly in intimate relationships. I'm sure it happens with professional relationships too. But it's like they label the person a narcissist just because it either didn't work out, or the person had boundaries, or whatever it was. There's some negative tension there. Didn't end on good terms, whatever. But I feel like that in itself, labeling somebody else a thing to invalidate whether or not here it's about people that actually did the right thing, like stood up for themselves, had boundaries or whatever. But it's like there's a movement, it seems like, of people that like invalidate the other side of the relationship just so they're the bad person. And I feel like that in itself has got to be some kind of disorder. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously not every single, like, listen, there's exes out there who are assholes. That's just how it is. But like, I'm talking about the people that go on the extreme. Like I joke a lot, man, about this. There's almost nothing that will like be a red flag to me as a person who's like, oh, my ex was a narcissist, and then this person claims to have never done anything wrong.
Right.
I'm like, bro, the likelihood of that, I feel like, is very low. You know what I mean? But it's like, I don't know, man. That has to be a disorder in itself, to label somebody else that just to invalidate what that person says about how the relationship was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe not maybe a disorder is a very heavy way to say it, but it's like, that's happened so frequently now. It's happening so frequently that people don't even want to use the word narcissist anymore, because it's like overused.
Right. So yeah, so this is like, I got so many, my brain is in like 10 directions right now. So first I will say it is actually called narcissistic personality disorder. So it is a disorder.
Okay. All right.
It is not 50% of the population or 92% of it's like the actual disorder itself is much more rare. It is higher chances that a male is going to meet the qualifications, but it doesn't mean that like only men are it.
Right.
It's along the lines of God complex typically. But there is no diagnosis for the other side, but there is victim mentality, and we never want to see ourselves as the villain. Now, for myself, I think I'm a great person. I know I've helped a lot of people. I do a lot of good things. I have really good kids. I know I'm the villain in somebody's story. I am absolutely the villain in at least one other person's story in the world. And probably today alone. I mean, I haven't left my house yet, but I'm about to go to Home Depot after this, and I might cut somebody off on accident. I've never met this person, and they're like, that F and B word, like, how dare her, like, I could be the villain, and that could have been the last straw for that person. And so it ruined their whole week or whatever, because of all the things that have piled on. And now I'm the villain. I absolutely know I'm the villain in somebody else's story. And like you were saying, though, like, it is a red flag if all you are is innocent, and they are this, and this. And it reminded me of my husband, who is the most beautiful, wonderful husband anybody can ask for. But his first ex, he's been married twice before me, and his first ex, he would tell me like these horrible things about her. Like, can you believe she would do this? Can you believe she would do that? And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And then he starts telling me the details, and I'm like, yeah, I absolutely can believe she did that. Like, and I actually don't like her as a person at all. I don't. I don't think I think she's a pretty abusive parent. And but how often I find myself coming to defend her because what they're labeling as crazy or whatever, and not just my husband, but his son and other family members. And I'm like, do you guys see all the things around why she had to make that choice? Like, I don't want to be defending her, so please stop making me. And just like, can't we just let her, like, leave her be, and maybe she won't be making these choices anymore? And I just think it's so funny when I look at my husband and I see what a beautiful, gentle human he is, that I'm like, how could you not see that you were actually the problem right there? And then he doesn't know any of my exes, so he doesn't get that same luxury if I bring up something about this, that, or he can't be like, well, actually, how it really happened was, because he doesn't know. He has no
Right.
idea. So I can be like, see, I'm right, and you're, you're wrong. You have nothing to compare me to. But, yeah. So it is, yeah. It's a tough thing. But yeah, if you think you've done no wrong, then you need to work on yourself, because everybody's fallible and you have something to work on always. Even if you're doing really great, you have something to work on. And in the dating field, like, not everybody is a match. People are exes for a reason, and it could be a major reason. It could be a minor reason. That doesn't mean that they're not somebody else's perfect match. Going back to my husband's first ex-wife, she's married again, and I think they've been together for like 15 years or something. Like, that's a good run. Like,
Right.
even if they failed today, that's still a pretty good marriage by today's standards. So she is somebody's perfect match. She was somebody's perfect match. And when they got married, I get it. They were young. They were teenage, like 19-ish years old. So, like, if you're 19 and you think you found the one, no, you didn't. Like, you probably, chances are pretty low that you did. So, and at that age too, you're both learning and growing. You don't really know yourself. If I look back at myself when I was 19, I was a pretty rad person, but I wouldn't be surviving as a mom with what I was at 19. And I was a loving person. I had all the love in the world to give children when I was 19, but I didn't have the way to survive the world as a parent. I would never want to be that person again, at my age and where I am in life. So yeah, when you're dating, like, you have to go in open-minded that people aren't going to be exactly, and that you can either, find out that you're not a good match right away, or find out that you're a pretty good match, and how can you grow together, if that's what if that's your goal. Some people just want to date for the fun and the experience, and I'm all for that. Actually, nowadays, I'm just like, please date like 47 people before you find your one. Don't go out there to find your one yet, because you don't know yourself. You don't know yourself with a partner. You are different once you have, a partner, a responsibility, and attachment that makes you a completely different person. So yeah, go out and find that, and realize not everybody's your one. You like, I'm a comic book nerd, and my husband's absolutely not a comic book nerd, but we happen to be a good match for whatever reason. Previous boyfriends I've had, huge comic book nerds, and clearly we were not a good match for each other, or we would still be together. So you got to find, what can you work with, what can you grow with, how can you change yourself without changing yourself. And how can they change themselves without actually changing themselves? Because you don't want a robot. Well, maybe you do, but most people don't want this, like, fakeness either. There's got to be the authenticity behind all these things. Yeah, I feel like I might have veered off from what we were talking about. I got
No, you're good.
I got so lost.
Yeah, no, but you're right though, because there's so much growth, I feel like, between, like, or hopefully there's growth between like 19 and 29 and 39 and whatever. Like, you go through, I feel like you just evolve. You know what I mean? And if the person can't grow with you, then that's going to limit your own evolution pretty much.
Right. And that's, I think, a big part of divorces nowadays. Divorces are so much easier to get than they used to be. And it's because one of you grew, or maybe you both grew in different directions. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not encouraging people to get divorces by any means, but, I hope you can try to work through it, as long as it's not abusive situations. I hope you can work through it. But, it's okay sometimes, for the better, even if it is just minor things. You both grew in different directions. It is better for both of you. It is better for the people around you to realize you grew differently. But the end goal, if you're finding someone, is growing together. And so how can you keep growing together? And growth is a huge part of survival for our species as well. We're not going to live this earth long and keep going at the rate we're going if we're not constantly improving us around each other. Like, how can I, like, if I'm better, then the people around me are also going to be better.
Mm-hmm. But you don't think that a lot of this is like the illusion of, maybe it's not even an illusion, but it's like the extreme possibility of choice because of social media and online dating and stuff? Because I just feel like, back in the day before the internet and before, you could swipe left or right, basically, or, before you could have your DMs full of whoever, I feel like back then, man, it was like easier to work through a problem and make things work. But like, it's like now, even the average person has so many, what seems like potential, dates or whatever online. And I mean, that's got to affect our psychology about this. That's got to affect like how you see this. It's just like, if whatever the process was, with our grandparents or whatever, if you went to school with a person or you were in the same neighborhood or whatever, however these people met each other, whatever it was, it's completely different from that now, and
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, that's one thing. I'm not one of these like anti-social media people. Obviously, I think that social media is great, but it's like, I think we just need to be aware, of what's going. I mean, because this, I'm trying to tread lightly here. It's the illusion of choice. Let's just say that the illusion of infinite choice, I think, it can be a bad thing.
It's real, but that comes more to how weak are you with temptation. I think that's more a personal thing. I mean, I have my own hatred towards social media because it is a lot of fake. It is a lot of danger. It's also got a lot of really cool things. I mean, just like stupid, like, oh, what's that recipe? I'm going to watch that lady do it again. Like it's just at my fingertips. So it has a lot of perks too. Getting to see my friends, getting to see my friends' vacations, getting to see their kids. Like, those are awesome. But also, I know that perky moment with, standing with Mickey Mouse probably didn't happen 5 minutes ago, and probably not 5 minutes after. It was a completely different, story. So, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. They're just seeing all these positives and thinking my life sucks because of it, and all these temptations out there. And that's both sides. It's not like only men are seeing temptations and acting on it. Women too. Man, women who are military spouses, I can't really stand them a lot of times, because their like goal is to like, how many dicks can I get while my husband's away? And I'm like, oh, why'd you even get married if that's your goal? I mean, unless that's your like agreed upon lifestyle ahead of time, that's different.
Right.
But most times it's not that. So, yeah, I think it's more about your weakness with temptations and how can you control your own self. And I when you're dating, I think it's great that you see somebody that there are more options for you, because then you're less likely to settle for somebody that you're going to end up divorcing later on. And I do think way back in our grandparents' day, it was so much harder to get a divorce. It was so much harder for women to be single. So there wasn't a lot of working through things, and a lot more just like dealing, tolerating, not loving life. And I remember an ex-boyfriend of mine, his grandma said there was many nights where she waited by the front door with the shotgun, because that was her ticket out, because, but then there, 2 weeks later, everything's good again. And so you also have to kind of keep that in mind too, that not everything's always permanent. That this bad moment you're feeling or whatever, it might be a bad month for you guys, and it feels like ending is the option, but it doesn't mean that forever will be bad. So is it something you can work through, or is it something that you can't? But yeah, when you're dating, look at all your options so you actually find the one that you don't want to have options anymore. Find that person that makes you forget there's options. Yeah, and be safe. Wrap it before you tap it. Like, don't, but I'm all for. I am pro, like, I'm not like, wait till you get married to do this, that, or the other. Like, that's not me, because I also know that's going to make you feel more tempted when you see something, like something you haven't experienced yet. But if you're out there getting experience with things, then you're not as tempted later in life, unless whatever you experienced was really great. Then you go back to that instead of searching somebody else,
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, because if there is so much choice and you still pick this person, then it's like, well, then it matters that much more because there was all this choice. It's not like if there were 3 potential partners and you chose one, it's like, okay, well, that's cool. But it's like there's 300 and you choose this one, it's like, so that's a good point. Yeah. And you mentioned something that I like. It's a bad moment, not a bad, relationship, and I guess that goes for anything. It's a bad moment, not a bad thing.
Yeah.
I know you got to get out of here in a minute. I'm gonna let you get out of here. I do want to ask you about this before we close. The shadow self. Have you worked with or explored that any, just far as like psychologically? I'm not asking you about yourself. I'm saying like professionally, like the whole concept, because the whole concept of it like fascinates me, man. Like the shadow self, like the fact that we could I say use lightly, the fact that we can understand our shadow and use it to, for better, you know what I mean? Just the whole thing fascinates me.
Yeah. I actually, with kids, I don't do that too much.
Right.
They don't really have the shadow we're talking about, or, that it's a little different when it comes to kids. With adults, I do. And with myself, that's actually where I've probably used it the most, is for myself, because it is kind of, I think being in my position of my I and what I do every day, like, I better be a good version of a human. Like, I can't, not saying I don't have any faults, or not saying I haven't ever faulted. I mean, after my 6-year-old was born, my postpartum depression was like the worst I've seen of anybody I've even worked with. So I know what it's like, and that was already having my doctorate's degree. I still was caved to those postpartum. I mean, I didn't kill my child or anything, but there was a lot of suicide attempts on my own part because of not being able to feel like I can handle life. But the only kind of way is to address your shadow self and who you are on this side of you versus who you're trying to be. It is a fascinating concept. Well, I don't even know if I'd call it a concept. It's just really reality. And, in general, it's just the reality of things. And are you able to face the reality? Like I said before, like, I don't want anybody to tell me I'm a bad mom, but anybody who only knew me in the moment of my postpartum depression, like, if you look at me and say you're a good mom during that time, no, I was not. I absolutely was not a good mom. I was trying my best, though. And, I just need to focus on the reality of who I was in that moment. How can I not have that again? How can I use that to grow? I feel like I've said so much about growing in this episode.
This is a personal growth podcast, man. It's like the best place for it.
Yeah. I just feel it's so funny because I don't really, even though that's like my end goal with everything of my clients is about growth, I feel like I don't actually talk about growth. We just monitor it, if that makes sense. So yeah, shadow work is very important. And that one's so easy that people can, if you can get a therapist, great. If you can't, that's great too, if you're actually willing to work on yourself. But shadow therapy there's a lot of books out there, a lot of workbooks. You could go on Etsy and buy worksheets like for 99 cents for 20 worksheets or whatever. So it is one that you kind of can guide yourself through, especially if you're somebody who's maybe thinks that going to speak to somebody like me is that they're a quack, they're just trying to change me, whatever. Like, you could actually do it yourself and not have somebody like, or maybe you're just not comfortable talking about some of your stuff, you don't want people to know that side of you. That's okay. It's okay that you want to keep that hidden for now. But so yeah, it is something you can work on for yourself. And I don't have any specific links, but definitely go to Etsy if that's something you can find so many worksheets on that and other mental health worksheets if you just want to like start your journey yourself. It's never too late to start,
Absolutely not. So where can people find you then? Where do you have social media? You have websites or anything?
Yeah, I'm pretty hidden as far as my personal life goes. I do have, what is my like, I try not to turn people away, but I do have, like,
Well,
my life is,
hang on, time out. I don't. If you don't want to share it, I was just saying like professionally. Are you anywhere professionally?
no, oh yeah. So, but I don't mind sharing my personal one. My personal Instagram is something like Rumblebee, but spelled with 2 3s. And you
Okay,
won't be able to see any of my photos or anything. But if you reach out to me on there because, say, you need mental health help, I'm not your therapist, but I am more than happy to help you find a therapist. And that's why I don't mind giving it out, because I would rather somebody come to me saying they need help and me helping them than people be like, I can't find this lady and now nobody wants to help me. I'm
I
here.
got you.
I'm here. So, but if you go to wolfheartfamilyservices.com, that's a bunch of therapy stuff on there. My email address is on there, which is just wolfheart.jacquelynn, but my name is spelled very crazy. So, I think it's on the screen right now, but that's how you spell it.
Yeah, and if you want to send me a link to that, I'll put it in the descriptions.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, and you can email me anytime. I do my best. I really want to reiterate, I am not anybody's therapist. I am not your therapist. I am just a therapist, but I am here to help. And if just you venting to me in one email helps you, cool. If you email me to find you a therapist, I will do my best. I'm not making promises, but I will let you, like, if you email me, I'll let you know, like, I need this information from you. Let me find. Another thing, sorry, I know I know I'm like, I gotta go, but
No, you're
one
good,
thing
man.
too is, I think sometimes therapy really can be scary and seeking help can be detrimental to careers and things like that. And I try my hardest to not make that be a thing. Like, if you have to get committed for, maybe you're feeling suicidal and you have to get committed for a weekend, that might mean your job for you. So I'm going to look for other ways that we don't do that, because I don't want therapy to ever be a negative for you. And I really want people to know that there's therapists out there who actually don't want to screw you over. The system kind of is set up that it could accidentally screw you over in some Florida, definitely. Where I live, it is really set up that if you need mental health help, you're probably screwed. So I'm going to work my best to make sure that it helps you only and doesn't cause harm to you. So I just want to get that out there also.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure other people appreciate that too. Um, one thing. Okay, so one thing that I normally ask people before we close out is if you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned. If it's something from your personal life, if you're comfortable sharing something from your career. I know it's hard to pinpoint the most important, so maybe just one of the most important. What do you think is one of the most important lessons you
Yeah.
ever learned?
Most important lesson. That's a tough one. I'm unteachable. No, just kidding. I've learned nothing in life. Yeah, I've had my own rough road, rough childhood. I think for me, my kids was a big part of growing up. I mean, I wanted kids. They weren't like something I didn't want, but that was a big growing up lesson. But more importantly, navigating through finding good people to surround myself with, which
Hmm.
sounds so ridiculous, but I'm a healer. And so I tend to navigate towards broken people, people who need to be healed. And that's not what I needed when I am also a broken person. Um, I'm not saying broken people can't be good for each other. Having related experiences is so great, but I think a big lesson I learned from me was not taking on everybody else's problems when I have problems of my own. Because, like, mentioning my postpartum depression, how many people I was working with at that time who were feeling suicidal, and I'm like, life is so great and let's try these, while meanwhile I'm like making my own plan at home, like.
Right.
So yeah, one of my biggest lessons definitely was not to carry everybody else's problems with me and not to let my own problems be what's weighting me down. I would have to go into so much more detail than that, but I think if somebody could just like take that and figure out how that works into their life, that might like boost them in some way for sure.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's crazy, man, that like a lot of times we spend so much time and energy taking care of other people, but then it's like, who takes care of you at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, can you even be there for somebody if you yourself, if you need to take care of yourself? I'm all for like taking steps back if you need to, and, taking breaks or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do though sometimes, because taking care of somebody else is a really good distraction from your own problem.
Mm,
But as soon as you're not taking care of them, or as soon as they're not around, your problem is boom, right in your face. Like you can't see
yeah.
beyond it anymore. So you're like, I gotta peek at your problem, please, so that this goes away. But that's not what helps your problem. It just hides it temporarily. So yeah, it can be so hard to not take care of people when you've got your own things that need to be taken care of. It's a
And I
coping
feel like,
mechanism.
yeah, I feel like for a lot of us too, it's easier for us to take care of other people than it is ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we can give advice and help other people, but then when it comes to us, we can have the same, like a very similar problem, and then we don't listen to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
um,
real.
well, listen, man, it's been a great time. Great talking to you. I am going to close the video in just a second, but I appreciate it. If you can stick around for just like a minute or two,
Yeah.
I'm going to explain the uploading situation to you. But I definitely appreciate your time. Appreciate your insight. It's nice talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Hey guys, I appreciate you tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more content at Pure Wisdom Podcast. This is on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. There you can like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.